What's going on, spectators? Thank you so much for coming back. You are not going to regret it. This week, Jesus and I welcome the incredibly witty and talented writer Alex Child to the show. But wait, hold up, there's more. That's right. In addition to a Grail tale, Alex also shares some very juicy details about what is next for his nostalgic horror series, Proctor Valley Road. So tell Paulie to put the kettle on and remember the rent for the landlady. This is episode 20.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Do you think we need one more?
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Do you think we need one more?
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
All right, we'll get one more.
Spectators, a comic book podcast with Jake and Jesus.
Welcome back, all you cool cats and kittens, to the latest episode of Spectales, a comic book podcast where we ask collectors and creators, what's your Grail tale? Thanks to everybody out there for making us a part of your week. We're your hosts, Jake and Jesus. Jesus, how's it going today?
Today it is going prodigious.
Prodigious
today.
I think you're just Googling this stuff now. I don't even know if you have actual word of the day toilet paper.
Oh, you want to see it? Because I will show it to you.
It is absolutely not necessary. Please do not go and get your toilet paper.
You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and send you some samples.
Yeah, sure. I don't know how to transition from that, but we're going to go ahead and give it a go. Okay, so gosh dang it. You totally ruined what I had planned for this opening.
That's my goal every time. That's my goal.
All right. Well, I was going to talk about the fact that I've watched Home Alone 5 times this week, but I think we're past that now. And I think we really just need to get into, we have a guest. So let's go back. For many people, the holidays are just getting kicked off, but I want to come back and say our listeners, I feel like you guys have gotten the presents early this year. 2 weeks ago, we had the ridiculously funny and talented Tony Fleece on the show, writer and creator of Stray Dogs. And then we followed that episode up last week with another absolute banger guest, writer and artist Andre Lima Araujo, whose latest work, A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, is lighting up literally every LCS in the country. Everybody's going nuts over these books. So now, today, by some crazy comic book miracle, Jesus and I have the absolute pleasure to welcome yet another incredible guest who is responsible for creating one of my personal favorite reads of this year, Boom Studios' Proctor Valley Road. He is Alex Child. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, how you doing? Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for joining us, man. We really appreciate you coming on. Like I mentioned to you before, and Jake just said it, he's been reading it. It's one of his favorite reads. It's one of my favorite reads. I was reading it before. I have it here behind me, the reprint, the awesome cover, a bunch of cool covers. Again, it just blows my mind that we're able to have you on. So thank you for joining us.
No, thank you. It's a real honor. I've been listening to some of your back catalog, and you guys are rocking out here. I love it.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. So for those out there listening, Alex co-wrote this with Grant Morrison, correct, Alex?
That's correct.
And the artist on it, and I'm just going to read straight off, is Naomi Franquiz.
That's correct as well.
Wonderful. Well, the entire piece is so well put together. I wanted to go back. So before a podcast was ever in my reality or anything like that, I honestly was just somebody reading books. On my personal Instagram account, I don't do it as much anymore because I have the podcast, but I used to do like little reviews of books. So this is one from March 15th or March 14th, excuse me. So it was a Sunday, and I used to always wait till the end of the week. I would read all the books that came out that week, and I would do a little review. Not that you give one shit about my review, but I'm going to go ahead and read it because this is how I felt then. And after this is just issue 1. And I feel like the books only got stronger. So Proctor Valley Road landed on my radar a few weeks back, and it didn't disappoint. This period piece horror series moves quick and doesn't skimp on the blood. Monsters haunting a road outside a small town and 4 teenage outcasts who just want to raise some cash to buy Janis Joplin tickets. That was again, it's just a quick recap, but ultimately it was like from the get, there was blood, there was rock and roll. I was a big fan right when it launched, and ultimately nothing did, like literally every issue just kept me on the edge of my seat. You always ended it with a cliffhanger, it felt like, at the end of every issue. And so to get you on again, I just wanted to say it's really great to have you on. But for those who haven't read it, quite seriously, stop listening to this right now. I don't care if you're driving, anything, Google and find the book and then buy it and read it and then come back and listen to this because it's going to be spoiler galore.
Oh, thank you, man. That's really kind of you to say. And that's a lovely review. And, I'm just so pleased that you enjoyed the series.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So let's go ahead and, while I would love to just continue to shower you with all the compliments and things like that, I think you're here for more than just the compliments. I'd like to really dig deeper into not just Proctor Valley Road, but what else you've got going on and kind of just how you got to where you are at right now. We have 3 basic segments on this show. We're going to talk about recent pickup. We're going to talk about a Grail tale, which we'll get to that, but that's your segment, so be excited. And then third, we're going to talk about some sort of closing speculation. We always go out with a spec because our listeners are collectors. Jesus, you usually lead off the recent pickups, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
So I mentioned this a while back to you, and it's been a little bit of a story with this book that I finally got in my hands, a second one. I have a graded one. We talked about that before on the podcast. But after our friend came on, I just had to get another copy, Ice Cream Man #1.
You got another one.
I got another one, and I'm gonna be picking up as many as I can. Hopefully I can pick them up all of them off the market. And then this is a really high grade, man. It has one dent somewhere around here, which I'm gonna try to press out and then get graded. But this is another horror book, horror anthology. We both love it. Martin was on our show. He talked about it, gave us some insight into it. Took me a while to get it. Took me a while to find it, get it at a decent price. But that's my recent pickup. It took forever to get here, and it shouldn't have, but it still got here. It was in good condition, great condition. So that's my recent pickup.
I love that book. I never get tired of that cover. Alex, have you read Ice Cream Man at all? Any of those?
I haven't, but I was just thinking that cover is just incredible, isn't it? And I've heard great things about it. And what can be creepier than a sociopathic ice cream man? I can't think of many things.
It truly is a lot of fun. The series has been running for a few years now, and it's kind of non sequitur. There's a little bit of interlinking stories between some of the issues, but I would truly say it is kind of one of those series you can kind of drop in where you want. But I think that the Martin's artwork, both on that cover and then just throughout, is dementedly good. I think that's the compliment I can give it.
It's just creepy, man. It's just creepy, and it matches the writing so well, and it's just it encompasses well. It's a great match between writer and artist on that series, in my opinion. And
something that's meant to be so nice and warming and friendly, and something synonymous with childhood, to then marry that with creepiness and malignancy and evil is always brilliant. I always think of Martin Scorsese talking about growing up in New York when he was younger, and he said he would hear the sound of fairgrounds and carnivals and ice cream trucks, but that would be matched with guys getting shot in the gut and people being
killed in the gutter. Yeah.
You think, oh, that makes so much sense now when you watch Scorsese films, but I think the Ice Cream Man looks brilliant. I need to get my hands on that.
We couldn't recommend it enough on this show. But let's talk about something maybe you have recently read or recently picked up. Is there something recent that you've gotten your hands on?
Sure. There's 2 things. I'm a little bit of a slow reader and always a little bit behind the pack. And that's true of television shows and books. But I've just finished Nice House on the Lake #1 by James Tynion. I never know how to pronounce his name. Is it Tynion?
Tynion, I will say the community is split on how it's done. Tynion, and he doesn't help the situation by naming his company Tiny Onion. So
help things at all. But he's James Tynion the Fourth as well, which is just pretty badass, really. I need to put some Roman numerals on mine.
You got to earn those Roman numerals.
You got to earn them. And Alvaro Martinez on the artwork. I mean, it's a great start, and it's filled with this uncomfortable, foreboding atmosphere, all driven by the clearly sociopathic Walter character. Just so much to enjoy. I love how the characters are introduced with the info pages. Such a smart, distinct way to articulate the backstories and allow us to invest in the characters. I love the slow burning, ominous pace as the narrative unfolds to its pretty disturbing climax. It's such a smart way to tell an apocalypse story by focusing in on Walter's quote unquote friends who are going to watch the world burn from the sanctuary of his house. It's just great. It's really unnerving and super original, and like all James's work, I want to see it turned into a TV series immediately. I also love Alvaro Martinez's art. It's moody and almost gothic, and just totally complements the dark nuances of the story world. So I'd say
it's equally as unsettling as the material that it's depicting.
Right, it goes sort of psychedelic at times, and that sort of adds to the nightmare, I think. So, a great book, and can't wait to sink my teeth into the rest of the series. I've also just read Dark Blood 1 by Latoya Morgan and art by Walt Barner. Loads to enjoy in this book. I love the time jumps and a slightly scattergun, non-linear narrative at play. Anytime I come across a story that mashes World War II history with fiction, I get excited, whether it's Pan's Labyrinth or Inglourious Bastards or Captain America, the First Avenger. I love that marrying of history and make-believe. So
fiction,
it's super cool. So Dark Blood really hit those sweet spots for me in issue 1. And I feel like they were holding back on Avery's character and its kind of deeper thoughts, and kept him quite mysterious. But you just know that a writer as seasoned as Latoya Morgan is teeing all that up for later issues. So super cool. Really enjoying it. I think Walt Varner's art is gritty and unapologetic and realistic, which gives a kind of mean and authentic edge to the story. So really digging it and looking forward to seeing where it goes for the rest of its run.
Well, I think those are two fantastic pickups. I think those are great. And the way that you described them really does play into kind of where I wanted to go with my recent pickup, in a sense. So the thing that I recently picked up, and so I've already read the series, but Proctor Valley Road trade paperback came out on November the 9th. So I wanted to, I guess, transition to a question regarding your story. Would you please talk us through, do you build those puzzle pieces separately and put them together yourself when you're writing each issue, or are you seeing the big picture and then pulling the puzzle pieces apart and separating them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's usually a case of, I find, where possible, to make sure I know where I'm ending. And huge, great chunks of the rest of the story can be filled out once I have the denouement, once I have almost that final image, and that can tie into the character endpoints and where their arcs will end. So it sort of varies. More often than not, once I know my ending, I can then sort of fill out what's in between, and then start to just place those jigsaw pieces in the right place, with the notion that I know more than the reader does, and that it'll slowly be drip fed over the course of the series, so that by the time you get to, issue 4, issue 5, as you point out, everything starts to come into focus a bit more. And then, I'm always reaching for those satisfying Tetris blocks that click into place in the final issue, hopefully that offer the reader some surprises, but also a degree of familiarity. I think it's always fun when building stories to give the reader what they're expecting and what they want, but then to just try and give them a little something on top of that, a little extra surprise on top of that. That's when I always come away most satisfied when reading something.
Yeah, well, I think it's like one of those things where it's like almost like a false sense of security. Like, oh, this is kind of where he's going, and then what happened? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just hits you from left field, and I think you captured that pretty well in the book. Because I just finished reading 1 and 2 again. I read them again, and I just found myself thinking that, like, okay, 1970s kids, right? Like getting into mischief, and then all of a sudden, like, almost all hell breaks loose at the end of the first one, and you leave on a cliffhanger. And like you mentioned, it's just those blocks clicking. And as a reader, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. And it makes you just want to continue to keep reading it. So, but that's awesome how you put it together. And that was a great question, Jake, on how his process kind of clicks in. And is that how you find? Well, I guess my question would be on that is, you have a co-writer or co-creator in Grant Morrison. How does that play back and forth between you guys when y'all are like mapping out the series?
Well, I had a pretty clear overview of the story as a whole before, Grant was approached, and he and I started to dig deeper into the story. And, with the overview, which was a pretty, broad 10, 15 pages of thick prose, Grant then went off and he wrote issue 1. And I then, did a little pass on his script. And then I went off and wrote issues 2, 3, 4, and 5. But after each draft, I would send it over to Grant, and he would add some brush strokes, and he would just move some of the furniture around, and then he'd send it back to me, and I'd tweak a bit of dialogue, and I'd kick the tires on certain areas and send it back to him. And through that sort of volleyball process, we ended up getting the issues written pretty quickly. So that was kind of our process. Not to mention that Grant is obviously a titan in the comic book industry, and was just incredibly insightful at all points when it came to story and structure and character and tone and dialogue. He's a master. So that made it a lot easier,
But with regards to working with him, you said that he was approached after you had sort of solidified kind of a story arc that you wanted to go into it with, right? But when he was approached, was that something that you were nervous about, or how did you feel when you were going into that approach with regards to him because of his name?
Well, I was excited because I actually came to know Grant's work, strangely enough, through his television work before his comic book work. I come from a television and film background, and only over the last few years have I found myself, falling more and more in love with comics. So, I watched Happy, and I loved the energy and the pulse and the pace of that show. And then I kind of went off and went into his back catalogue and sort of realized who he was and what I was dealing with. And so I was excited and I was enthusiastic. And just when you're in the presence of someone who's been doing it as long as Grant has and has the experience that he has, you just listen and you hope that you can, go toe for toe with him, with what's being produced and churned out. So, but he made it such an easy process. He's extraordinarily laid back and charming and cool and funny and has just a kind of a synergism to him, that makes him very easy to get along with. So I think if I'd come from a really heavy comic book background, I would have been quaking in my boots. But because, I was playing catch up with Grant's back catalogue, it was only sort of, during the process and almost towards the end of it that I thought, oh wow, no, I'm really in the presence of greatness here. We'd get on the phone at slightly more friendly hours than this. Not that he's thrilled to be here. But, we could get on the phone and talk things through, and you'd spitball and just kick ideas back and forth, and things would unravel, and a lot of it ended up in the book. And I found him just incredible to collaborate with. So I definitely feel as though I've had the chance to work with, I think one of the greatest living writers.
I mean, he's on the list, right? Like he's
right.
They're he's in the club. Right?
Yeah,
he's not waiting in line.
No, he's not in the club. He's in the VIP.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So you brought something up that I think that we should address, that elephant in the room that everybody is probably going to be shocked to hear, but you're not from the United States.
United States, and I'm sure my accent hasn't given me away at this point. No, I'm not. I'm from London originally, but I live in Oxfordshire now, which is it's Wind in the Willows, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien.
Tolkien country.
It's Tolkien country, yes.
That's fantastic. I'm gonna move in.
Right. You're talking to a big Tolkien guy. That's why. I mean,
you're a big Tolkien fan, right?
Yeah. I'm a very Lord of the Rings nerd is the title that I'm comfortable with.
When's the TV show dropping? I mean, we've been waiting for long now. I'm desperate.
That's just digging the knife in deeper. No, yeah. We're just absolutely. I know that the entire pandemic, of course, slowed all of it down, and the wheels are so big on a production like that that when they stop, getting them moving again, I'm assuming is just as hard as the first time around, right? Getting that production to go.
Right.
So, but let's talk about where you're from a little bit more. Those listening as well, he mentioned the time period and things like that. It's 4 a.m. or 4:30 in the morning for Alex, and he was so kind enough to say that he would come on. I want to preface, we let him pick the time, more or less.
Probably true.
So, if anything, he's keeping me up late. So, but regarding where you're from and this story is set in the United States. This story is set in rural America. Neither you or Grant are from rural America. And yet you capture it so well. I mean, to a T in some cases, not just, I mean, some of them are, you're playing off of some of the character tropes that you see in movies, that you see, caricatures that you're going to find in some of the old, I guess, I immediately think of Dazed and Confused, or, some of those type of characters that you see. But how much work did you put into trying to capture rural America so accurately?
Well, I am a diehard horror fan, first and foremost, but I'm particularly passionate about 70s horror. So Carrie, Don't Look Now, The Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Rosemary's Baby, The Hills Have Eyes, are all, in my opinion, masterpieces and movies that I grew up watching over and over. So creatively, my radar is always looking for opportunities to tell stories in that era and with that wonderful, gritty aesthetic. And then, a transparent love for Stand By Me and Stranger Things and The Goonies and Paper Girls. And so, I had this idea about four girls who were best friends, who were all very different and individual, but collectively were a force to be reckoned with. And these girls had been rattling around my head for some time without a world or a story to throw them into. So I'd been reading quite extensively about various hotspots across America, and there was no shortage of stories of haunted hotels and forests and ghost towns. And then I came across this place called Proctor Valley Road in Southern California. And what struck me most about it was that it had an array of different sightings, in that people weren't seeing the same thing. So the deeper I dug and the more research I did, the more fascinated I became by this 7-mile dirt track turned highway that was seemingly entrenched in reports of ghostly sightings and unexplainable creatures and people literally vanishing into thin air. And, you get your usual sort of goofy YouTube ghost hunter videos, but I was finding historic articles from the Chula Vista Star newspaper dating back to the 1940s about armed teenagers chasing some sort of unidentifiable monster out in Proctor Valley Road, and consistent reports of roadside corpses and missing hitchhikers that frighteningly were still being documented in the last decade. So, I took my love of 70s horror and I took my group of teenage girls and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to plant this rather ragtag group of characters in this real life precinct that is steeped in campfire stories and urban legends, but then to tell a horror story that is backdrop by real life events. And it was the real life events that helped me sort of bring it into focus, the Vietnam War and the women's liberation movement and the space race and the civil rights movement, and to sort of explore an America that has moved on from the free love and flower power and is now facing a decade of economic turmoil and the shame of demilitarizing from Vietnam and facing the hangover and the public outcry at the death of hundreds of thousands of US soldiers. And with the draft in place and fathers and uncles and brothers all fighting in the jungles, there's this vacuum whereby the girls suddenly lost their male role models and now had free reign of their homes and their neighborhoods. And what's left is this sort of fascinating clash of baby boomer housewives and their pre-punk, socially conscious teenage daughters. And so these relationship shifts became a hugely important theme for the story, a sort of a clash of young women and their mums, as well as the collapse of the patriarchy. Anyway, I digress.
I mean, we're absolutely eating all of this up. You could have kept going. Maybe to help it continue, the relationship that the four girls have with their principal. Sure. And at the end of issue 3, where the principal is brought face to face with the truth, which he had told them was a complete lie. He did not believe them. And so this relationship of a superior in their community, somebody who was in charge and supposed to be caretaking for them, so supposed to be guiding them in some way, shape, or form, and ultimately he doesn't believe them, and then he comes face to face with the landlady, basically. I immediately picked up on this, the idea of not just the authority can't be trusted or anything like that, but just that these girls were almost a lost generation, right? In this particular case.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's a very articulate way of putting things. And, unfortunately for the girls, a lot of the male role models can't be trusted, whether it's the headmaster or the police or some of the local residents in Chula Vista, or a bunch of assholes at the fair, or a bunch of dudes driving past in their car. All of these factors contribute towards the girls having to club together even more, which is such an important theme for me across the show. It's about the power of their synergism and how the girls put aside their differences and unite to become a force to be reckoned with, a power unto themselves. And that's reoccurring throughout the whole story as we see the girls at their most effective when they're working together. So that stuff felt very important to Grant and I.
I can understand why. I think it's wonderful. Just to maybe wrap this up in a nice bow. For those of you who have not read Proctor Valley Road, I'm going to say it again. Please go get yourself some. Go read it. It is a wonderful read. It is just engrossing once you start it. And the thing that you guys are going to have that I didn't have the luxury of is all the issues are available right now. Right. I was reading it at the edge of my seat every month going, all right, when's it coming out? When's it, looking for the next date kind of thing. And while that was a lot of fun, I would probably just, binge this from the start. I would Netflix this like crazy. So go check it out. The trade paperback came out on November 9th. It is available at all LCSs, all stores out there. Go get it.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't read and are just collectors, stick around to the spec part of the podcast where I'll tell you why you want to pick up some Proctor Valley Road.
Wait, we're doing a preview? We're doing a preview of the spec. We don't do previews of specs.
I just did it, man.
I'm gonna cut that. I'm gonna edit that out.
If you edit it out, I will say it every segment from now on.
You know what? The next segment is the one that we're interested in anyway. So, Alex, the next segment we have is the Grail Tale. For those of you who have not listened in the past, we always collect a Grail Tale, a story. Jesus and I are collectors, so everybody that we have on, we always ask you to give us a story, something that we can take with from the interview, collecting a story. So a Grail Tale, though, is basically any book or any collectible or anything that you cherish or have come to fall in love with or be inspired by, something that you would call a personal grail of yours. And we just like to hear what that is, maybe the story behind it, how it inspired you, or how you got it.
Sure. My Grail Tale is Kill Your Boyfriend by Grant Morrison.
Oh, nice.
Which I think came out in 1995. Philip Bond did the artwork for it. And I got my hands on it sort of weeks before I met Grant Morrison for the first time. And it was recommended to me by a friend of mine as a good place to start with Grant Morrison. And you think most people would say, well, Animal Man or The Invisibles, but they said, read Kill Your Boyfriend. And it's a one shot, and it's really, really violent and really, really anarchic and funny. And it exceptionally British as well. The story, I don't know if you know it, takes place on a sort of bus that trundles around the UK as a young girl has murdered her boyfriend and goes off on a sort of Natural Born Killers style road trip with another killer. And I devoured the comic. And I found it really creepy in a wonderful way. And I could relate it back to a lot of British references from Grange Hill to the Magic Roundabout that I thought, well, this feels ostensibly British. And then I was fortunate enough to meet Grant and have dinner with him for the first time. And we met in a restaurant in London. And after quoting Whitnell and I at each other for about half an hour, which was a great way to break the ice, I said, I got a hold of your comic, Kill Your Boyfriend. And Grant and I had a chance to chat about it and where his headspace was at when he wrote it. And he was typically super laissez-faire and cool about it and funny and insightful. So I have a particularly special connection to that comic, which I have upstairs in my office, because of what followed and because of the circumstances around it. I hope that does the job for this segment.
Absolutely, as long as you're willing to answer questions. Jesus, I'll let you lead the charge on this one.
I mean, it's just it's a pretty cool. Like I'd never seen it. I'm looking at the cover right now. It's a double-decker bus, isn't it? Is that
Yeah, it's a double-decker bus. And it's so happy, it's like the sun's shining and they're riding around and there's cows in the field and clouds in the sky and loads of blood and loads of violence, and it's great.
And so you said somebody mentioned it to you that you should start there. And I guess what was the outcome of that? Like what insight did you gain into Grant Morrison by reading it and then also seeing the man when you got to go to dinner with him?
Well, I thought this guy's a sick son of a bitch, and then I met him, and he's so charming, and he's got this wonderful magnetic glint in his eye that makes you know that he's not taking everything particularly serious, but he's wildly intelligent as well. So it just gave me a real insight into Grant, and then obviously after that I went off and devoured the rest of his work. But I think that particular one shot will hold a special place in my heart forever.
That's awesome, man. That's so awesome.
So something about that book, Kill Your Boyfriend, that for me, I immediately relate it to Preacher. So have you read the series Preacher, Alex?
No, but I know of it.
Also released by Vertigo in 1995. And it was written by Garth Ennis, art by Glenn Fabry. I apologize for the pronunciation. I'm terrible at it. But the thing is back in 1995, of course, I didn't read any of these books at that time. I was not age appropriate at all. So, but when I caught up to these books, and I want to say, honestly, I probably caught up to these books about a decade ago. I caught up to Preacher right around, it was a couple years before they'd maybe just announced that they were going to be doing the TV show for Preacher. And so I wanted to read it. So I went back and read that, and that kind of led me down a path of all of these, I don't know what you would call them. They're like 90s grunge books. I don't know how else. There is something, there's a tinge to them.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
And so you just fall down this rabbit hole where they just decided they were just like, blood and guts and violence and all of these things that you would not associate with the superheroes. I mean, maybe besides Batman, I don't know. Something about Batman is always violent. The 80s were a very violent time for Batman. But you usually think of superheroes as the polish when it comes to comics, and something about in the 90s, and it wasn't just horror comics, right? Previously the blood and the guts were in the horror comics, and they just decided that, in the 90s that they were going to come out, they were going to break all the barriers. Sorry, I'm getting to a question. So when it comes to this book though, so you found it, you read it, and then you had that, you got that, the thing that all nerds wish they could do, to read the book and then to have a conversation with the individual that came out of, and you got to have a private conversation, right? You're just at the dinner and you're just like, hey, what the hell was up with that? Right? Like,
yeah, pretty much.
So I want to know, what was your first question to him? I mean, do you have that, like, was there something burning where you were just like, seriously, man, WTF?
I think I said, is this based on any true story? And he said, no, it's not based on any true story. Maybe a fantasy. I think he said maybe something like, maybe it's based on a fantasy or something. I don't know if it was tied in with one of his, younger dalliances as a young man. But I think we touched on the violence as well. And you're right about the 90s and film. The 90s felt like a particularly violent decade for pop culture. And obviously Tarantino was popping off, and Scorsese, and, Seven came out, and horror movies were sort of veering into particularly, less schlock horror and more slightly abrasive horror. So I think the conversation inevitably with Grant led into film and with that book, Kill Your Boyfriend, there's something again, a bit like The Ice Cream Man, which is disturbing in that, you know, when you juxtapose blue sky and trees and sunshine and you know, young children and things that one associates with innocence, and then marry it with bullets and throats being slit and violence and bloodshed, it's sort of operatic, you know, and I'm a big fan of it personally, and I'd like to, you know, revisit Kill Your Boyfriend. I haven't read it for a couple of years, and be able to think about the conversation I had with Grant, and then look at the book again, and sort of, you know, just digest and soak in that very special conversation.
Did the book or the material of the book, such as the violence, now I know Proctor Valley Road doesn't shy away from it, but would you say that reading that book is informing even more creativity coming out of you in the future? Like, is that something that is informing or influencing the type of work that you feel like you want to do next?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, it always depends on what story is pulling me out of bed in the morning, and what story I'm thinking about as I fall asleep at night. You know, I'm a '90s baby as well, so I did come up on Scorsese and Tarantino, and even the slightly more low rent Steven Seagal films, Out for Justice and Nico, and you know, those films are super violent, and Paul Verhoeven's work in the 80s and into the 90s. So yeah, I think in some way it would. I mean, it was interesting because I came late to comics, and Proctor Valley Road is the first comic that I wrote, and I was given a crash course on comic writing by Grant over the course of a couple of months. You know, I knew nothing about the language of comics, FOCs and floppies and incentive covers and LCS and trades. Those words didn't mean anything to me 3 years ago, because I came from a screenwriting background. So you know, I was privileged enough to have a quite an intensive crash course in comic book writing from Grant, and everything down to the strict 22 pages in a single issue, and breaking, you know, 5 panels down onto a page, and, you know, Grant telling me how to hook out at the end of every other page with a question or something that propels the story and invites the reader to turn the page. So it still all feels quite new to me, even though, you know, the book's come out and has enjoyed the success that it has. Again, it just felt like a perfect collaboration, and a timing thing whereby I feel like in some ways Grant and I were destined to cross paths at the time that we did, and I will remain incredibly thankful and grateful for the experience. It changed my life, you know, not to over dramatize things, but it completely changed my life, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's so awesome. Cool. It is so cool. I don't want to rush us along, but ultimately, I also know that we can only shower you with so many compliments, Alex. I don't know if we've made our quota for the episode yet, but if we haven't, we're sure as hell on our way. So,
well, I have a few more real quick. One thing that you mentioned earlier, Jake, was meta, because you said that how cool was it to, you know, ask, you know, you read something and then you're getting to sit across and ask the person who came out of their mind questions. We're actually getting to do that with you. So that's awesome, Alex. You know, that's really awesome. And we appreciate you. And then you mentioned the 90s, man. I don't know if you guys have read this. I just have to tell you guys about this series called The Brat Pack. Have you guys heard of The Brat Pack from the 90s?
I haven't, no.
Nope.
So The Brat Pack, it's on the same level of what you guys are talking about with the Kill Your Boyfriend and the Preacher and stuff like that. It came out in the mid-90s, and it subverts the superhero sidekick like trope, and it really turns it dark, where the superhero, like, I mean, just treats the sidekick like dog crap, molestation, stuff of that nature. But it's all behind the scenes, because in front of the cameras, there's still the superhero and the sidekick. And it's just, it was just interesting, because it's the same thing that you mentioned about the 90s. It got so dark and violent and gritty. And that's one that I've read, and I was like, oh man, this is crazy. This will never get, I don't think it'll ever get made into anything, but it just also encapsulates it, just like you guys were talking about.
That's so cool. So are you saying that the superhero is like bullying his sidekick behind the scenes?
All of them, all the superheroes bully their sidekicks, and the sidekicks are yearning to be the number one superhero, but they're always being pushed down by the ones that are at the top. And what happens, I mean, spoiler alert, is they're like 20 something years later, but one of the ones that they bullied and they left for dead basically turns into the villain of the story and comes back and starts, taking him out. But it's just a pretty cool, pretty interesting, flips it on its head.
Yeah. Well, I like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's called Brat Pack. It's pretty cool. And I think that's it. I lost my train of thought on the last one, but those are the two things that I wanted to say.
Nice. Don't worry, I'll pick it up. So I think that'll wrap up that segment. Let's move into the next one, and this is the one that I'm always excited about as well, because we get to talk about what's next for us, or for our listeners, or for you, Alex, and that is speculation. So we always end every episode with the spec. There are a lot of people that are collectors, and so they're always looking for kind of either a book that maybe is undervalued, or they're looking to talk about maybe something in the future that would give them reason to want to, quote unquote, invest in something, right? Now, we've already been kind of talking about Proctor Valley Road, and Alex, we briefed earlier. So I just want to say, you've got some kind of news, something that maybe isn't public, that you could share here with regards to Proctor Valley Road, right?
Sure. So when I took the story out to Los Angeles in 2019, it was originally pitched to Universal, whom I'd worked with before. I actually adapted a graphic novel called We Can Never Go Home into a television pilot script. And I pitched Proctor Valley Road to Universal, UCP, and the great team over there. And they had just started this comic imprint, whereby, a system in America whereby the studios are building IP internally to then flip it and turn it into television series. So Proctor Valley Road was the first comic book released by Universal, I think in their history, as part of their new comic imprint, UCP Graphic, and in collaboration with Boom Studios. It's been optioned and is part of an overall television deal I have with Universal, and I'm currently writing a television pilot script of Proctor Valley Road, which will be going out likely next year to buyers, with the hope that we can get it up and running as a returning television show.
Amazing. That's a bombshell, right? People are going nuts right now listening, all of them. And now everybody's like, oh yeah, maybe I should get on my phone and buy the first Proctor Valley Road.
I try to tell them. I teased them earlier.
I warned them an hour ago or whatever it was. No, that's huge. Congratulations, Alex. Yes. That's very cool. And the fact that the original writer of the story of the comic book is doing the screenplay, right? For a pilot episode, you said?
For a pilot episode, and I'm moving through the script at a pretty rapid pace, and it's the first time I've adapted my own work, and I'm having a lot of fun. And the studio are being fantastic, and Grant is being brilliant, and the publishers, Boom Studios, are super supportive. So I feel like I have an incredible team around me, and it's really, really exciting.
That sounds incredible. Awesome. It sounds kind of like yet another dream come true for you, Alex.
Yeah.
Everything is just coming up roses for you at the moment. We caught you at a good time, didn't we?
You did, and who knows where I'll be in a couple of years. But no, I'm very fortunate to be in this position and to be working with with just people who love story, and who are invested in telling great stories and stories that will stand the test of time. And fortunately, Grant and Boom and all the guys and girls at Universal have that in spades. So it's a good time. It's a healthy time.
That's awesome, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this as well. So, hey Zeus, as much as I hate to transition away from something so awesome, I'm gonna go ahead and put you on the spot and say, what's your spec tonight?
And I have 2 specs. I'd be remiss if I didn't spec on Proctor Valley Road.
You can't double spec. Alex just did that, so you're gonna have to pick something else.
But it's gonna be different. Let me tell you why it's gonna be different. Because again, we do have readers. We also have collectors that listen to our podcast, and some of the other variant covers, the B covers with that Christian Ward did, like the 1 in 10 incentive covers. There's one cover specifically, which is Proctor Valley Road #2. The Christian Ward 1 in 10 variant. I feel like that cover is gonna be a big cover going forward. It's phenomenal. I'm showing it to you guys. I'm sure.
Yeah,
Alex.
That's so cool. That one with the demon car and the skeleton underneath the earth and the sort of great sign on top of it. I mean, Christian Ward's work is quite extraordinary, and actually that variant. I have framed upstairs.
Oh my God. I was just going to say, it looks like it's something you hang on your wall. Like,
it's just awesome. It harks back to pre-code horror, which we talk about. The story's awesome. We've talked about it. It's awesome, but sometimes people just want the cover. And this is one of those that the cover is phenomenal. So that's my first spec. I think it's an awesome spec. I have that one already. I didn't find it in my boxes, but I have it, and I want to get a graded one now. But then the second spec I have is something that just came out, Hawkeye #11, which is also a pretty interesting cover. It's the first, so it's an Eisner winning issue from 2014, and we just had Tony Fleece on last week, which had his story with Stray Dogs, which was from the point of view of the dogs. This issue was from the point of the view of Lucky the Pizza Dog, and it won an Eisner that year for best issue. I
remember that. Yeah. It's a very unique way to tell a story, all through the eyes of the dog, who in this particular case can't speak to anybody. Yeah, it's a great looking issue.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. So it's a cool cover. There's some second printings that are really rare that's in purple. Those are really, really high priced, like $900 for them. Wow. This book is still attainable in raw form, $20, $25, $30, but I'm just letting you know, if there's at least one segment from the point of view of Lucky, which we know he's going to be in the show, or if there's one episode, this issue is going to skyrocket. That's my spec. I think I should pick it up. I think it's a cool cover.
So it's definitely, and I would hope that they would do at least a scene in the show for that, especially just to showcase that dog and the artist's work, because they put a lot of time and effort, and that could have been a disaster, and yet if you read it, it is so engrossing. It's so much fun to read. It's a great story.
Well, the thing about it is, that Lucky the Pizza Dog has a lot to do in that series, right? For the Hawkeye of the all-new Hawkeye, they put him in the show for a reason. Like, they're not just going to put him in there like he's a character. So they have to do something with them. We just don't know what yet. Hopefully, like I mentioned, it's a segment, or at least a few parts of an episode, and then that book will see some rising prices.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm going to be relatively quick with my spec, because I actually want to bring this around and ask Alex another question, and it's kind of in regards to this. So my speculation is going to be Flash 123. So this is a cross between the Golden and Silver Age Flash from 1961. It is Gardner Fox is the writer, Carmine Infantino is the artist. But what is interesting about the storyline is this is really when DC invented the entire idea of a multiverse. because they basically said the Flash from the Golden Age and the Flash from the Silver Age are going to meet in a book, and people's minds collectively just exploded in the 1960s. And what is crazy to me is that they invented the entire idea of, the multiverse. Basically, they did it in 1961, and I don't really even think that they knew what they had on their hands until 20-30 years later, ultimately. But this particular book is, in my opinion, so it's not necessarily the cheapest book you can go out and find. You're not going to get it for cover price, for God's sakes, but you're going to go out and find that, considering how important the book is to the entire comic book world, to the, like, literally, like, the idea of just crossing, I mean, Alien versus Predator doesn't happen unless this book happens. And I don't think that's a stretch to say, but these crossovers really all stem from this one book. So I think the weight it carries is very important. So I would recommend to anybody out there, if you're looking for an important piece of comic book history, this would be one to get. Now, this is the part where I bring it on back and I ask Alex a fun question. Alex, you set your story, Proctor Valley Road, in the United States in 1970, during a time where you yourself said you were very influenced by and in love with horror movies from the 1970s. Would you say your characters exist within the same universe as Freddy Krueger or as Michael Myers or as the world within The Exorcist, right? Leatherface.
Yes. Yeah. Now you put it like that, how could I say no? Absolutely. I think they have to. They have to. I mean, the idea that Leatherface could be running around in the background in Southern California, maybe a slightly younger man, is too enticing to say no to. So yeah, absolutely. I have to put my girls in the same space as all those iconic horror legends.
Oh, and with I know that it's just it's just a fun fantasy, but the Leatherface is a very good one because, of course, right, like a slightly younger version of Leatherface is kind of cutting his teeth, so to, in many ways. When you think about it from that point of view, how does it change the way you see your girls, your characters?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it changes how I see the girls. I worry about them a bit more if Leatherface is going to be tearing around with a chainsaw. But if it was Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or Leatherface, I'd worry for those guys more than I'd worry for my girls.
Well, and I was going to come back to your characters sort of subvert some of the tropes that were built for the, there was always the final girl, right? The femme fatale, the final girl, but you have four.
Yeah.
And in this case, I like the way you put it. You almost worry for Leatherface, right? But not, a lot of the women were the victims. They were usually the first victims of these characters, of these monsters. And your girls are not the victims. Well, in some ways they are, but they are the victims that triumph. So
that's it. That's entirely correct. And I think I always set out to do that. And I grew up with, a strong female presence around me. So I think that's fully informed why these girls came out the way they did. And yeah, no, I like to think that they can handle themselves against Leatherface.
Well, we all are going to just sit and wait patiently for the next arc of Proctor Valley Road where Leatherface makes an appearance.
What a crossover that would be. Can you imagine? That would be so cool.
Does Universal own Leatherface?
I don't know. I'll have to make some inquiries into that. Great.
All right, Alex, this has been an absolute pleasure for myself. I'm assuming Jesus as well.
For sure.
Before we just cut off and end this all, let's go ahead and tell the listeners, if they want to find you online, they want to follow you, or they want to maybe reach out to you, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram, Alex Child Writer. Those are my handles, and you can find me there.
Perfect. everybody go give him a follow. He's going to soon be a very, very big name in Hollywood because of his Universal Pictures, publishing, or excuse me, not just publishing his work, but also the Proctor Valley Road not sitcom. Jeez, I'm gonna
Could
go
be
ahead and
a
edit
sitcom.
that. No, it could not be.
Make it a
Don't
sitcom.
make it a sitcom.
A sitcom with blood and guts.
Proctor Valley Road getting released later on at some distant future, but the pilot is being written. So go give him a follow now before he gets 100,000 followers, right?
Thanks, guys.
You're very welcome. For those out there listening, we are going to have more guests coming up in the future. It was our pleasure to have Alex on this week. Next week, we're going to go ahead and we're going to have a collector on. We're not going to say who, but we've had 3 artists, 3 creators on, and next week we're moving back into the collector realm. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you. Have a good night.
Thanks.